Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to go on a rant because Lucasfilm are a bunch of fucking idiots. And the reason why we're going on this rant is because yesterday we got news that Gina Carano, who plays Cara Dune on The Mandalorian, or at least for the first two seasons, has been let go by the studio. And I'm going to be reading some tweets and some quotes and giving a lot of thoughts on this. So I have a funny feeling I'm probably going to get a strike for this video, but I don't really care. Um, now, Lucasfilm called these tweets abhorrent and horrible. Now I'm going to read you some of these tweets, and you can make that decision for yourself. And I'm also going to give my personal thoughts on it. Now, full disclosure: if you don't agree with me, I don't really care. You can not agree with me. It's perfectly fine for people to disagree on shit. And I don't think a lot of people on social media understand that. They don't understand the idea that there are people that think differently than them, and it shocks them that people think differently than them. And that goes for people on both sides of the aisle on this. That's not specifically something that's to the left, although it does happen to be a bit more apparent there. But here are some of the tweets, and I have no idea in terms of the context of these. And when I say that, I mean what preceded these. Now, these could be straight posts, these could be things that were in responses, but reading the tweets in and of themselves, they don't appear to depict anything, at least untrue, and they don't appear to depict anything that is well, horrible in the sense that it's going after a certain group of people. It's just stating historical facts. And the first one is Jews were beaten in the streets not by Nazi soldiers but by their neighbors, even by children, because history is edited. Most people today don't realize that to get to the point where Nazi soldiers could easily round up thousands of Jews, the government first made their own neighbors hate them simply for being Jewish. How is that any different from hating someone for their political views? It is not. It is very, very, very similar. The only difference being is that one is a religious dogma and one is a government institution, which at this point some of those things are one and the same. Um, and let's examine this first one. Now, here's a history lesson for people, and here's a lesson in history for people that don't actually look and read history. Um, Leading up to World War II, there were a number of extremely anti Semitic laws that were passed in Germany by the Third Reich. Several of them had to do with, if Jewish people wanted to leave the country legally, they actually had to pay their taxes for not only the year that they were leaving, but the year that they would not be in the country. So they had to pay 2 years of taxes at once. And their taxes, I believe, at the time were also jacked up uncharacteristically high. Um, in addition to the fact you had Jewish businesses that were vandalized, there was a ton of stuff going on in Nazi Germany at the time. And the thing is, it wasn't all related to the government just going into people's houses and ripping them out of their homes. This also had to do with the corruption of the people themselves, where you had, again, as she states, they made their neighbors turn on them, and that's not, and whether that was through fear, whether that was through indoctrination, whether that was through anything, it still happened. You can't. It would be the equivalency. I mean, again, it's a bit of a touchy subject because it is a historical thing, but at the same time, um, the people that would be responding to this at this point in time, there are not a whole lot of Holocaust survivors that are still alive, that were actually in the Holocaust. Most of them are dead because if they weren't, they'd probably be in their late 80s or 90s at this point. The number is dwindling every day, kind of like World War II veterans, where we don't have a whole lot of them left anymore. Um, so you have this whole thing where these people are getting offended by something that they know nothing about, other than maybe what they skimmed over in a history book. Because again, a lot of people do not study history anymore, which is, again, if you do not study history, you are doomed to repeat it. Um, but she posted that. She posted a kind of goofy picture with a person with a bunch of masks on, and it says, "Meanwhile in California." Again, it's a meme. It's a joke, people. Come on. That's actually kind of funny. If a dude's wearing like seven masks and he's like standing on like a street on like Broadway and or something like that. Um, and look, there's been plenty of people that have been critical of the mask thing. I understand why they want us to wear masks. I think it's stupid to wear more than one. I'm definitely not doing that. Um, but again, I don't think that's bad either. Um, and the other thing is a lot of this stemmed from people on Twitter originally anyway. I don't know if these specific tweets came from this, but a lot of this extended from people going after her because they didn't like her on The Mandalorian. They thought she should be replaced by a person of color. And she basically fired back at them because she's a former MMA fighter. She's not going to take shit from people. That doesn't even make sense why she would take shit from people on Twitter. And she's actually a very good shit talker on Twitter. I'll give her that. Um, and then this one, which I can't agree with actually anymore, and it's put so simply, is expecting everyone you encounter to agree with every belief or view you hold is fucking wild. And then she also tweeted, Jeff Epstein didn't kill himself, which, by the way, there's a lot of evidence to say he didn't kill himself. Let's just be honest about that. And there are people that's not something that's out of the ordinary. Let's say, how many Twitter accounts do you think have said Epstein didn't kill himself? Like, it was a hashtag at one point. So I don't really think that that's that big of a deal either. Um, Now, I understand where Disney's coming from in the sense of a PR issue. If you have an issue with one of your people on social media who's attracting negative attention to your company, I understand that that could be an issue. But here's the other problem: is that Mandalorian season 2 did very, very well for Disney, and Gina Carano was a part of that. Was a fairly decent part of that too. And now Lucasfilm just alienated that entire fan base. Behind her specifically, and probably a lot of people that were behind the show as well. I'd be curious to see what the numbers are for Mandalorian season 3 when that comes out, if she is not rehired before then. Which I think is also a possibility in this. I think that they might be waiting and they might try and get her back. Although if they're going to do that, I have a funny feeling she's going to come to the table and demand a larger cut of money to come back because of what they have done here. But this also shows that Lucasfilm is willing to bend the knee. Lucasfilm is it's a spineless organization. It has been for a very long time. Basically, ever since it got bought up by Disney, it's lost any kind of integrity that it had, and it had a good amount at the beginning. But with the stuff that's happening now, here's the other issue that I have with this, and that's the idea of who made this decision. And I'm very curious to know who actually made the decision to cut her, because I'm curious if this came from Disney proper, if this came from the parent company, if they came down and said you have to get rid of her, or if this was a situation where Lucasfilm did this internally. Because if they did it internally, I'd be very curious where this actually came from. If this came from, I don't think this would have come from Favreau or Filoni. I think that I think that they're willing to give her a pass on a lot of this stuff. Kathleen Kennedy, I could definitely see this coming from. I could definitely see this coming from somebody like a Kevin Feige or somebody like that with a lot of push in another part of the company. And again, he's dipping his toes into the Star Wars thing too, because of everything that's going on with the movie that he is producing. So I wouldn't be surprised if it came from him or even Bob Chapek or somebody that's a bit above where the heads of those studios are. So I'd be very curious to know where this order actually came from. And I'm also curious to see what's going to happen with The Mandalorian Season 3 and what numbers that's going to have compared to Season 2. So, overall, I think that this was an incredibly bad decision by Disney. This was an incredibly bad decision by Lucasfilm. And it just shows that they're still the same organization, that they'll bend the knee to certain people when they think that there's enough pressure, which there usually is not enough pressure to actually do something. Because that's the bottom line in Hollywood anyway. The bottom line in Hollywood is money. Everything else doesn't matter when you're talking about financials in Hollywood. Uh, you could be the scummiest human being in the world, like a Harvey Weinstein, and nobody will touch you because you have money and because you control either a studio or you control some aspect of the filmmaking that makes you bulletproof. And we saw that with people in Hollywood for years and years and years. Hollywood is a cesspool. Let's put it that way. Hollywood is a living cesspool. Um, Most of the people that you see in Hollywood, other than probably a few exceptions, especially on the studio side of things, are scumbags. Um, they're people that should not have the amount of power that they have. I mean, we've been seeing this stuff for years now with all these people coming out. We just had another nuke that got dropped yesterday with between Charisma Carpenter and Joss Whedon, which I'm not going to go into. But this stuff is going to keep happening because Hollywood is they're kind of like an idiot on Twitter. If you don't toe the company line 100%, if you don't do stuff that they deem that you should have to do, then you're not even if those things make absolutely no sense. They could have a contract that says you have to show up every single day in a pink polka dotted dress, and you would have to do it or you would get fired. And that's the way that Hollywood works, even though that's insane. Uh, so this whole situation is just a clusterfuck. I think it was probably just a matter of time uh, before this was going to boil over in one way or another because Gina Carano was not backing down on Twitter. The trolls or the leftists or whoever the hell was going after her at this point were not backing down on Twitter. So it was going to come to one of two things. Now, what I assumed would most likely happen is Disney would relieve Gina Carano of her Twitter account and they would have it put under some kind of a she would have like a ghost account or something where she could actually operate or a privatized account, and then everything else would be put under some kind of Disney PR banner. That would probably have been the correct thing to do in this situation if you're actually looking at a PR nightmare, which you weren't, by the way. But if you're actually going to go, but they actually took it a step farther and they fired her from her position on the show, and she will not be, as of right now, she will not be coming back for season 3. I would implore people to, if you're going to, and again, this is entirely up to the individuals in this sense. I'm not telling people to go do this specifically, but I'm saying if you feel about this similarly to how I feel, which is that Lucasfilm is a spineless shell of what it used to be, don't consume any more of their products. I don't plan on doing it. I don't plan on paying for anything related to Star Wars anymore. I'll pirate the shit out of the third season. I'll pirate the crap out of the second and first seasons too. I don't give a shit anymore. So I'm not paying for anything else from Lucasfilm. I'm probably not going to pay for anything else from Disney either, because again, all I have to do is wait a couple of weeks and it'll be leaked onto the internet somewhere. Uh, so I'm not going to be giving them any more of my money in theaters or in any other sense. That goes for Marvel and any of that stuff too, because again, that whole thing's been going down the drain for a little while now. But if you feel the same way that I do, I'd implore you to do the same. If you don't like a company or you don't like things that they've done, do not give them your money because you're just empowering them to continue doing these things. And Lucasfilm, in and of itself, like I said, is a spineless shell of what it once was. So that's just my opinion on this. I want to know what yours is. Put your thoughts in the comments below as usual. I like to know what you're thinking. Hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?